luckily we sold everything off and we were okay, but it messed with my members. And I was like, wow, but you have to get testing happening and testing of what the laws are working in and how they are built in practice. And I think you guys are already starting that at such an early stage. And I think that's really important.
Well, and that's where the case law comes into effect. It is important to get a good lawyer. As you said, when you moved to New York, if you'd had a good lawyer, they probably could have saved you some of the hassle. It's just, unfortunately, it's a cost of doing business. Laws are complicated, just like code is complicated. There are bugs in the laws, just like there are bugs in the code, but you don't want to screw it up, because the downside of screwing it up, it's going to cost you more to fix it later.
Yeah. One of the things I want to touch on before we go is your sandbox. So I think most people don't understand how critically important that is, but I'm always on the innovation edge of companies, like starting up in the beginning of them. And it's so critically important when we're reinventing practically everything to have a sandbox opportunity. And I think having a fintech sandbox is brilliant, because that's where there are so many regulations and there are so many things going on that is making it difficult for you to develop great technologies and innovation that is going to be of great benefit long-term in terms of our financial processing. So that's pretty cutting edge stuff that you guys have done there. Talk a little bit about how that came about.
Yeah. And to my knowledge, nobody's applied for it yet.
Oh, they should.
Well, candidly, we were copying Arizona, so we can't claim credit for that one. A lot of what Wyoming's done, we've been first mover, but on that one, we weren't. And Arizona's had a few companies apply. So I think, and the law, I think, just took effect in July 1st. So it's still early days. But part of it is that Wyoming has such light touch regulation anyway that, we're not like New York or California, where the sandbox is probably more meaningful, because there is not likely that heavy-handed regulation to begin with in Wyoming. But what it does is it basically says, pretty much with the exception of the consumer protection and fraud requirements, you can do anything in Wyoming as long as you let the regulator know who you are, what you're doing, and you're probably going to have to post a surety bond. There's a requirement in the law to do that, just to make sure that you're not a total fraudster. Once you do those things, you basically have a safe haven, a safe harbor for 2 years initially, and it can be extended for a third year. And the thought process there is that if there's a new business that doesn't currently comply with the law, but is a good idea and is worth trying, and it's not going to rip off customers, if it's really that good of a business, then Wyoming's probably going to make it legal within 2 to 3 years anyway. Arizona, I think, only had a 1-year sandbox. So 1 year really isn't enough time to get a
little
statute
short in
changed.
development.
Yeah, exactly. But the other thing we did, which Arizona, I believe, didn't, is that we made it reciprocal with foreign government sandboxes. So the UK has one and Bermuda has one. And Bermuda reached out to us because they are also a very respected but light touch financial services regulated jurisdiction. I used to run a couple of Bermuda insurance companies, so I'm very familiar with Bermuda. Bermuda Monetary Authority in insurance and reinsurance really is truly world class. And so it's interesting, they're making a play for blockchain as well. And so, literally a company can string together businesses between the EU, passported through Bermuda, and then the UK, and then the US by going into these sandboxes.
And, I've interviewed a few fintech app companies and things like that they chose to go straight out to another country. A good example of that is Wallah and the dollar, that coin that they've created. And, they're trying to serve an underbanked and underserved community.
Right.
And she wanted to do it because she was seeing her family from Mexico trying to send money and trying to deal with this. And so she was seeing this happening and thinking that she wanted to serve her local community. But the regulations were just so strong, she couldn't test out her proof of concept. She couldn't, deal with the and so she couldn't stay in business and deal with trying to change regulation at the same time. And so she chose to go out of country. And I think that's a shame for us to be able to not find these new things that might be working in our community and being able to have the time and the commitment to changing those regulations overall and proving that our model will work and it's safe and it's not defrauding anyone. So I love the idea of you guys doing that, because, whether it's fintech or in any other area, a sandbox can be a very important proving ground and important to really moving our innovation forward. And I think there's a lot to prove here in crypto and in blockchain that needs a safe haven to do that in.
Well, and what's interesting is Wyoming is being viewed viewed effectively as a sandbox by the feds. They are not shutting down what Wyoming is doing in the banking industry. So the special purpose depository institutions, the Wyoming bank regulator has done extensive work with the Kansas City Fed. They're pretty certain to approve an application. Nothing's certain until somebody actually shows up and applies. But they even commented on the statute before it was enacted into law. So they've been a partner of the Wyoming Banking Division. And what they're doing effectively is saying, all right, we're going to let Wyoming do this and we're going to watch. And we're going to see if this works. And if it does work, then I heard a number, I won't attribute it to, it didn't come from the Fed, but it did come from a regulator in DC who said, if this works in 3 to 5 years, we may loosen the federal regulations. So it's not official that Wyoming's a sandbox for all the banking and payment stuff because we've not been given that title, but de facto, that's what is happening here. Everything that Wyoming is doing, though, is it complies with federal law. So it's not like we need an exemption from federal law. So maybe that isn't an apt analogy because we don't need any exemptions. State chartered banks have been around for more than a century. And there's actually really good federal law about how other states have to respect other states' state chartered banks. You watch, I think that Wyoming state chartered banks will end up obviating the need for a BIT license in New York. Nobody has actually tested this yet, but there's very good reason to believe that that's the case.
Interesting.
And again, it's because state chartered banks have been around a long time. There's a lot of precedent and a lot of law.
Well, Caitlin, your energy and your excitement about this space gets to me every time I see you. So how can someone find out more information and follow what's going on? Because things are changing every day. You're getting new rulings happening and things are going on. Where can we follow that and where can we find out more?
I'm very active on Twitter. That's probably the best place for the day-to-day. I also have a pinned tweet that has a link to a Forbes.com article I wrote that summarizes the Wyoming legislation if you'd like to start there. And Caitlin-Long.com is a blog that I post articles on. I'm working on a book, although I have no idea when that'll get done. And in the meantime, check me on social media. I'm also pretty active on LinkedIn.
Wonderful, which is how we connected actually. So yeah.
Yep.
So great. Well, I will have that Forbes article and links to your Twitter and LinkedIn and your website and all of that in the blog post for this episode.
Awesome.
So if you're listening to this while you're in the car, please don't stop. Don't get in an accident. Don't write it down. I'll have that for you. And that will be at newtrusteconomy.com. So Caitlin,
Fantastic.
Is there anything on the forefront, anything on the future, anything that you're excited about that might be coming up that you want us to watch for?
Yeah, we actually have 7 more bills that we've proposed for the 2020 legislative session. They've got to wind their way through a long process. And a couple of them are really interesting. One is that if your private keys are in Wyoming, that a judge, whether it's criminal or civil or administrative, cannot compel you to disclose your private keys. That's one proposal. They can compel you to move the assets. They can compel you to sign digitally to prove you own something, but they cannot compel you to reveal your private keys. We acknowledge that private keys are not like a regular password. Once you reveal them, they're permanently compromised. They probably unlock a lot more assets than a divorce settlement might. Somebody might be entitled to in a divorce settlement, for example. And so compelling the actual release of the private key is something that we wanted to protect. Now, that's going to be a controversial one. I'm not sure we're going to get it through, but
that is going to be controversial.
Right. But that really, truly plants a flag in the sand that Wyoming is protective of this industry. And the second one is for developers. Along those lines, we passed a bill through the task force that says that you cannot be criminally charged merely for writing a line of code in the state of Wyoming. So if you are maliciously using your code or somebody else's code, of course you can still be criminally charged. But merely writing the code, it's protected speech effectively in the state of Wyoming. You can't be criminally charged for it. That one got a very, very loud round of applause from developers. Open source developers so often use pseudonyms because they're afraid of mostly criminal but also civil liability for their code being misused. And so what we're trying to do, again, is just plant the flag. This is the state that gets it, and this is the place where you want to be. This is the place where you want to set up your business. We're going to treat you the best. And after 29 years, I moved back here to Wyoming, and I truly believe there's more opportunity for the financial technology sector here in Wyoming than there is in New York, for sure.
I don't blame you at all. And the countryside is beautiful there.
Indeed.
So
Indeed it is.
Yeah. And you know what? I think most people don't realize how close big cities in Colorado are as well, right across the border. So there's all kinds of things to think about and look about, whether you want to actually domicile there or start banking there, or what you're going to do with it, and with how you're going to organize your business and what you're going to do. So Caitlin, thank you so much. I'm really glad that we finally got a chance to connect. I'm glad the audience has gotten a chance to see and hear all the excitement about what's going on in Wyoming. And we will keep in touch. And when some new things, we'll be sure to notify the audience and maybe do another episode in the near future.
I'd like that. Thank you very much.
So everyone, this is Tracy Hazard on New Trust Economy, and I'm excited to bring you this episode today. And I am so glad that you are all thinking about the future, because you've been messaging us. You've been talking with us on Facebook and Instagram, basically at New Trust Economy. And of course, at our website, newtrusteconomy.com. And you've been sending us questions and messages, and we really appreciate that. And we look forward to bringing you interesting new topics and interesting new people like Caitlin. Thanks everyone for listening. This is Tracy Hazard.